All right, let's keep recapping some games here. Catch everybody up on what you missed across week 12 in NWSL. We got to talk about a draw, a 0-0 draw, specifically between Houston Dash versus OL Reign. Lori, I'm going to let you know on the preview, I didn't feel great about making a pick or even previewing this game because I was so nervous about the heat effect. Talking about a heat check for Caroline. Let's bring it into this game. But for literal heat check of the weather,
Yeah.
I was nervous. I was nervous about it, even though it was, you have games kicking off and what's, considered an early evening kickoff. It's it's tough. It's a tough scenario. I think something that Jordan and I felt like we were speaking about over the last couple of weeks or so when it comes to Houston specifically is the challenges that they have faced in kind of turning their stadium into a place where it's like this is our home field. Let's make this a tough place for everyone to play in. And they get a little there's like almost like they get a little bit of help in that there's this tough games where they have to battle against heat as well, but it's almost like it also takes a lot of energy from the home side as well. And so wasn't too sure if there was going to be enough in the tank on either side here to really come out and steal a win. And if it happened, that it would kind of be maybe like an exhaustive kind of oops type of goal. But that ultimately didn't happen in this game. It ends scoreless between the two of them. You see players exhausted at the end of this game. I don't know, Lori, is this kind of game where it's like if you're both teams and you kind of have to play in those conditions, are you just like, okay, we split the points, we're moving on?
Totally. I remember as a player, that was the toughest place to play. The
Ugh.
travel, because it was just a bit further, obviously, when you're going completely to the West Coast from the East Coast, depending on where you're playing, then it's going to be a long trip. But then it was like going to Houston, it was just like this a little bit further. That was just kind of annoying because it's a little bit longer than you really want it to be. And then, as a player, that was the toughest place to play because you would be, myself as a major sweater, I would be completely drenched and dehydrated before the game would even start. So then you're already down. And even though the sun might not be out, it is still so humid. So I think, to what you were saying with you and Jordan, I think there's still ways to find for Houston how they make that like their fortress, because we saw a glimpse of that last year in the quarterfinals when they played Kansas City. Kansas City ended up winning in the last second, but that place was packed and the energy that they felt. So the fans are there. It's just about showing up because that's what pushes your team on. And I like this Houston team. And you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they have the fewest goals conceded. So in the league now.
After this week especially, I think.
Yeah. And so this is a team that they've done really well defensively. And I think they're creating chances. I felt like last week they were unfortunate not to get the win versus Gotham. But it's a tough place to play. I think they need to collect points more than they are there, given that they are used to the heat, especially against an OL Reign team. Because I think if you're OL Reign, regardless if there's a red card and you go up a player, right, or you're up a player throughout a lot of that game, you're still like a point on the road at Houston. That's like 3 points. Get us out of here because they're not going to be used to that heat.
I'm with you. I love the antidote, dude. You're like, as a major sweater, it was tough for you to play there. No, I listen. I think we're talking about timing and phases of things for teams. I think at this point, you've got Houston just kind of like taking their like they know it's coming. Like we've heard from the players themselves. Like I think it was Jane Campbell not too long ago in a post game conference. I said, you know what, we're getting it together. We don't want to peak at the wrong time. We're staying in it. And they're just on the outside looking in, right? They've been kind of hovering in seventh place. And I think this team going on a bit of an unbeaten streak of their own. They've got 2 wins, 2 draws. I think they're going to give us something to keep watching for towards the final stretch of this season. I think this game, maybe folks aren't looking at this type of match from Houston as like a statement game, but I think I might be because I think they lose Natalie Jacobs on a red card.
Yeah.
Right. And we're talking like you have to manage a game. You have to manage a game now with 10 players in these ridiculous conditions. And to just sort of see how they were able to not just withstand those conditions, but kind of just put out this really gutsy type of performance against an all-rain side that, I next to Portland, I've lauded on this show as like having the deeper benches. So I
Yeah.
two teams with incredible depth, and I think it's Portland and I think it's the Rain. And I think when you go down a player in a match like this, again, it's against a team that has the depth, it can be nervy. You can maybe sort of, lose your focus, lose your mentals a little bit. And we didn't see that from the Dash side. So I thought it was an incredibly gutsy performance from them. And so maybe folks aren't looking, like, maybe they look at the scoreline and they're like, whatever. Like, that's not a statement game at all. But I think if you're really watching this game, some of the factors that came into play, for me, I'm looking at it as a little bit of a statement game as well. You got to watch out for the Houston Dash team, because as it sort of feels like they're kind of figuring things out in the attacking sense, where now they've got Sanchez, they've got Ordonez, Alozier is alongside and fitting in absolutely well with these attackers in the front line. The fact that they could pull off a match like this, I think, says a lot about the team.
Yeah, I like that perspective a lot. I agree with that. I think that's a great perspective because, I was kind of looking at it as an Rain. It's going to be difficult to travel. Yeah. They get the point. But going down, I agree completely. And you just feel like they are on the brink of, finding kind of that rhythm in the attack. Lozia, who you mentioned, lights out. Okay, Nigeria, here we go.
Yep. I know we're tuned into that too. It's so close to World Cup that we can't help but look at these performances from players who are likely going to be missing for the World Cup, and she's absolutely one of those players. Yeah. But yeah, a little bit of a tiny, maybe not a full statement, but it's a game that absolutely says something to me from the Dash. But speaking of statement games, one that I was looking for, let's talk about Racing Louisville versus Gotham FC, and I'm very excited to hear your insights on this because I heard you on the call for this one, but in the preview to let you know what I was looking for, Lori.
Yeah.
Look, this Racing Louisville team, they're good and they're fun. And I like watching them play soccer. But in the regular season, I'm like, they've shown that they can hang with what's considered, top upper half table teams and top talented teams, playoff kind of caliber teams, contender type teams. Mm-hmm. They've shown that they can hang, but I was looking for them to finally get a win against one of these teams. Mm-hmm. They've gotten results against bottom half table teams. They're dominating a Central Region Challenge Cup division against other teams who are mostly struggling this season. We're complimenting Houston Dash, but you're talking current
or rotating players, right?
And Chicago, and rotating players. So I'm like, okay, they're getting wins against these types of teams. I want to see it against a top table team, and they win. They did it against Gotham, and I picked them to do it, and I'm happy to say that they came through with it. Lori, what'd you see on the call? What'd you think of this game? 2-0 Racing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really high on Gotham. I've liked what they did on the offseason. So coming into this game, I'm still high on them. I think they're really kind of sorting things out in the attack. Kind of what are the pieces for them, right? In terms of like, they can go quick, Gotham, but you also know that they want to keep possession. So I think they're still sorting that out. And I say that about Gotham because even though I've been high on them, I felt like, this is a tough time to, one, almost like Houston, travel to Louisville. It's not easy to get there. And also face this Racing Louisville team, because I think early on, part of the struggle for them was, one, collectively getting everybody back. They had some injuries, so they lacked a little bit of depth compared to other teams, forcing some shifting of players. And then in the last, this would have been the 8th game if Leicester would have played in all competitions, that they've gone with the same back four and London goal. So I'm like, okay, they're building consistency here. Now, what does that look like consistently in the attack? Because they need to put all these pieces together. And I just felt like coming into this game, well, we're going to see a really strong Racing Louisville side. And also it was interesting because Jen Hildreth, who's on the call with me, the day before, we got to go see Kim Bjorkegren at his office. We got to see the training facility behind the scenes. They have a fantastic setup. It's a lot like Kansas City. They do share it with Louisville City. However, it's just completely mirrored on both sides. So they're also completely separate. But the facilities, everything, you just got this really kind of family-oriented a facility and just the club in general. So that was interesting to see behind the scenes. And I'm like, here we go. DeMello, who we know is going on that plane, let's just put it out there. She's going to have like a different sort of emotion with this game. That Lana, my goodness, what a game. The lights out. On the other side, you have Wang Chuang, who gives you something different. So all of these pieces, and all that to say is why I started with Gotham, is because we've talked a lot about what they've done in the offseason, but I don't think we've given enough credit what Racing Louisville had done in terms of bringing Carson Pickett, bringing Urseg to just balance out some of their youth, because they were so young last year and inexperienced. Then you bring in internationals that are continuing to build and just perform on another level. And you also have the rising stars of Howell, Borges, who's great. So I think they have incredible balance to this roster that we probably haven't given enough credit to. And this feels like another one of those statements where you're like, midweek, they created a lot of chances, which they've been really wanting to work on. Scored 3 goals against Houston, who had heavily rotated. So I want to make sure that is known in a Challenge Cup game. But something for Racing Louisville to build off of. And I think you saw that. They were in a rhythm. Gotham weren't, and made it difficult, really difficult from the first whistle.
Yeah, I think, something that also came out of the reporting, you touched on it out of The Athletic when they reported that Sarva would not be available for the World Cup. These additional tidbits that, other players who are going to be named to that roster when it eventually does drop. And one of those players that got name dropped was Savannah DeMello. And I think watching this player's evolution, not from year one, right, as a rookie, into year 2, we've seen zero signs of a sophomore slump. If anything, we have witnessed her elevating her game we've witnessed her elevating her game in this sophomore season of hers. And I think a part of that, though, is I like that you mentioned Borges in that sense. I like that you mentioned some of these other internationals that are around the team and on the pitch, is having those extra outlets, right? And you're able to focus on those strengths of your game within a 90-minute match, because you've got the teammates to build with and off of. And just sort of watching her performances over the course of this first half of the regular season in this most recent game against Gotham, and the reports that she's going to the World Cup, I'm very excited to see what this player could do in a World Cup with players who are used to playing in these kind of high environment, high stakes type of games. So I love this for Racing. I love that this was a game that they got in light of the news that has sort of dropped already around them. But I am curious. That's probably going to be a really big piece to go missing for a long stretch of time in your season. So I'm curious to see the response and what the adjustments are going to be in light of what may be her eventual absence here.
Yeah, I agree, because she's such a huge piece. And so it is about then other players stepping up. And that's kind of the beauty, right, at this point in time, is that with how this league works, is when you miss players, who can step up, who can make a statement for themselves and really start to compete for those positions in a way that maybe they wouldn't if a Savannah DeMello hadn't gone on that plane or hadn't gone to the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely.